Good morning, and welcome back to our Newman Lumen series. My name is Allison Pelkes, and I am the Multi-Faith Coordinator for the Truett Center for Religious and Spiritual Life at Elon. It is my pleasure to put together this series where we are discussing the theme Bridging to Hope. We have two more speakers left to hear from, one of whom I will introduce to you in a moment, and next week we will hear from retiring University Chaplain Jan Fuller, which may be perhaps one of her final times to address the campus. I invite you to hear her talk next week at our typical Newman Lumen time right here on this platform. This morning, we will hear from Lucia Lozano Robledo. Lucia is a senior honors fellow from Bogota, Colombia, majoring in French and International Studies. She also has minors in Latin American Studies and African American Studies. Lucia worked as a student coordinator for the Center for Race, Ethnicity, and Diversity Education, or the CREED, with the Deep Peer Social Justice Education Program for 3 years. She was previously the president of the Latinx Hispanic Union, a lead mentor for the Elon Academy, and was engaged in undergraduate research for 2 years during her time at Elon. In her free time, Lucia enjoys cooking, practicing yoga, and taking care of her plant babies at the Elon Community Garden. After graduating, she will be working for Alamance Achieves, a local Alamance nonprofit tackling education equity issues in the area through the Elon Years of Service Fellowship. Without further ado, here is Lucia.
I'm very thankful for this opportunity to be with you today to share a little bit about my journey and about what brings me hope. In the past year, in the context of so much uncertainty, a lot of hardship, and also opportunity, hope has sometimes felt like it's in short supply. So I'm thankful to be with you today to reflect upon this further. One of the greatest sources of hope for me in this past year has been cultivating a sense of home and of internal belonging in my physical body, regardless of external circumstances. When I say home, I mean that internal feeling of belonging, of ease, and of wholeness, regardless of external circumstances such as location, people that may surround you, or just the global circumstances. The idea of home has evolved for me a lot throughout the past few years. Home is Bogota, Colombia, where I grew up in for 12 years and where I was raised with all of my family. Home is also North Carolina, where I've lived for 9 years. I lived in Chapel Hill, and then now I'm at Elon. Home is also wherever my parents are and wherever my brother lives. With my family, we've always talked about home being wherever we may be together, no matter where in the world, whenever we can get together, that is home. That is a home feeling. Home is several locations, several people, different kinds of feelings for me at this point. So the challenge for me has been to really reconcile all of these different locations, people, and feelings into my present life and as something that I can carry with me wherever I go. Another challenge that I have faced when thinking about feeling at home and finding a sense of belonging in the United States has been the relationship between that feeling and immigration status. For the 9 years that I've been in the United States, I've always had a temporary status, not knowing how long I will stay in the United States. I grew into an adult here, and then I've gone through college here, and yet I remain in this temporary limbo. I didn't realize how much this had an impact on how I saw myself and how I accepted the American side of my experience until I studied abroad. I had the chance to study abroad in Paris, France last spring, only for 2 months, but that experience really highlighted for me the necessity to accept and to embrace my American experience, regardless of immigration status. Before I studied abroad in Paris, the way that I navigated spaces in the United States was always through my otherness. I was always like, I'm Colombian, I'm not from here, even though I'd been here for years. And it was only until Paris where I was really confronted with the idea that I need to embrace my Colombian American experience. It's not official and it's not formalized through an immigration status, which can be hard. But it is up to me, and I can choose to embrace this as a part of something that has really shaped me into the person that I am today. So now, thanks to this study abroad experience, I have started to embrace and to claim more and more my American experience. But the struggles remain when it comes to that temporary limbo. I'm not gonna lie, a lot of times, even in these past few months, thinking about transitions post-grad, the ideas of I have to always find ways and struggle to stay in this country and to be in a place where I feel like I belong. It can be hard sometimes. But this really points even further to the idea of finding and cultivating an internal sense of belonging and an internal sense of home, especially in regards to when an immigration status or the formalities of you being in a specific place are not there. So feeling fully at home in my body is something that is challenged by these different factors. But there is this song in Spanish. It's called Movimientos, or Movements. It's a song by Jorge Drexel. And there's a line in this song that says, de ningún lado del todo y de todos lados un poco. And what this means is not fully from one place, but a little bit from everywhere. And I feel like this line really helps capture how I feel about where I belong and where my home is. I used to think about my experience and my belonging from a scarcity mindset. I would always feel displaced and not fully satisfied and not fully content with where I was at and how I fit into my surroundings. And though I still feel that way sometimes, I've tried to shift my mindset to more of an abundance standpoint. So thinking about my experience not as displacement, but more as multi-placement. I have belonging, I have wonderful and strong relationships in multiple places. And that is a blessing that I can choose to see from an abundance standpoint rather than from a scarcity standpoint. I can see my transnational, multicultural, multilingual experience as rich and as complex. And I can choose to focus on that outside of the complexities of feeling out of place. With the pandemic, a lot of us have been forced to stay inside, to be away from family, to be away from the places and the people that we may call home. So I know I'm not the only one struggling with these ideas of home and of belonging and of how to find that feeling within ourselves when we can't travel. I know some of the things that have helped me in the past year to feel at home have been daily practices and activities that I have been doing for years. That at this point, wherever I go, wherever I move, these stay with me and these help remind me of who I am, how I want to feel, and where I want to go. So some of these things that help me feel at home and help me feel whole in my body include cooking. In the past year with the pandemic, I learned to cook more than ever, and learning to find new recipes and building that relationship, that really intimate relationship with my food was wonderful. And I know it's something that has translated back into my life at Elon, and I know it's something that I can carry with me at all times. In addition to that, something that helps me feel grounded and that helps me find a sense of belonging in my body is yoga. I have been practicing yoga since high school, since freshman year of high school, and I have found that this practice really helps remind me of who I am in the ways that it allows me to pause and to really listen to how I'm feeling and, how to move accordingly. Something that stays with me wherever I go and that reminds me of who I am is definitely music. If you know me, you know I'm always making playlists. I'm interested in all kinds of genres of music. I'm obsessed with Tiny Desk concerts, if you know those. So music is definitely something that really carries my identity in the variety of experiences and cultures and language that I've been exposed to up until now. So this is not to say that building this internal sense of home is a static state. It's once you achieve it, you're done, it's crossed off the list. For me, this is something that is constantly in process and is something that I have to choose to practice and to find time for every day. So this is not an easy solution to feeling better when you're feeling out of place, but it is definitely something that I have found that over time, the more and more I practice and I take the time to reflect upon these things, the more I can easily pivot or bounce back from those moments of feeling like I don't belong. Now I find home in all kinds of feelings and in all kinds of people and in all kinds of locations. Home can be a stranger that I hear speaking Spanish and that I choose to start a conversation with. Home can also be the geography of the mountains for me, because I grew up in Bogota, in a city surrounded by mountains. So whenever I go to the mountains, I breathe in that cool mountain air and I immediately feel at home. As I think about transitioning out of Elon as a senior, these ideas of home and of belonging and of finding that hope in myself are definitely with me at the moment. Preparing to transition out of this season of my life, it is important for me to continue to trust these tools that I have built and these ideas about internal sense of belonging and of home, not knowing what the future holds really, but really it is important for me to trust this process as I have done it for many times now, the homemaking encore and encore. I know that I always have access to this feeling of home, and it is something that I continue to cultivate wherever, and it is something that I encourage everyone to think about. So as I end my story, I just want to thank everybody for listening and for being present with me, for giving me this platform to really talk about how I have grown in this past few years and what I have found hope in the past few years in regards to feeling at home and feeling a sense of belonging. I just want to leave with a few food for thought questions, thinking about home, belonging, and finding hope in that. And I invite everybody to think about, how do you find home? How do you define home? And how do you find home? Is it in people, in places, and feelings? And where is it scattered? Where do you find that? How do you feel about yourself when you're away from these home or homes? And how do you find a way to get back to yourself and to feel whole? And what ideas, people, places, and practices remind you of who you are and where you belong? And how can you continue to cultivate that in your present life, and especially in those moments of uncertainty, of displacement, of global turmoil such as a pandemic? Thank you so much for listening.